right, it's time to begin our Bible study here this morning. We're in 1 Timothy, 1 Timothy chapter 3, and this is the book we're in. It's the systematic study of 1 Timothy through Hebrews. It's got this pink banner. Does anybody need a book this morning? Yep, we got some extras. All right. I have that we left off on question 11 on page 7 of the workbook. And to catch us up, we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of reading here. If somebody wouldn't mind rereading 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. All right, Jay's got it. All right, thanks, Jay. What translation was that one? New American Standard. All right, I really like the way it kind of does some of the explaining for us. Of course, I've been using the Old King James because that's what our book is in. But again, that'll kind of help us with some of the questions. Now, one more reading before we get into that, because I want to go back and revisit question 11. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 12. If you see there in question 11, it says, from 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 12, it is seen that those over us in the Lord are to blank us. And so let's turn to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 12. And we beseech you, brethren, to know them which labor among you, and are over you in the Lord, and admonish you. All right, so let's re-answer that question. I think we did answer that question last week, but from 1 Thessalonians 5:12, it is seen that those over us in the Lord are to what? Us. Admonish. All right, so I don't really think we had time to talk about what this means. What does it mean to admonish? Instruct? That's probably a real good. Does anybody have another word, or does yours say instruct? It says instruct. Perfect. All right. I mean, that's really a good way to translate it. You know, in today, the way we talk, we don't generally say, now I'm going to admonish you on something, but we might say, hey, I'm going to instruct you on something. So thinking about, and hopefully you remember some of the things we talked about last time with these overseers, with these elders, and part of their purpose, okay, to instruct. Now, what are overseers, those over us in the Lord, supposed to instruct us on? What what do people need instructed on from overseers in the church? Sometimes our lifestyle, okay? Do you mind explaining that a little bit? They might want to admonish you. Okay, that's one way to look at it, right? They might want to instruct you, say, hey, let me teach you, instruct you about how a Christian should be acting, right? So that admonishing could sometimes come in the form of, I wouldn't say discipline in this necessarily, because, hey, maybe they didn't know better, but instructing, teaching about, hey, your lifestyle, it's not what the Lord wants here. And let me show you. Now, what would they use to instruct somebody on something like that? The Bible, right? If you remember, we talked last time, they're not to be just this heavy-handed, just because I said so on everything, right? But, hey, taking the Bible and instructing, right? Now, is this something that only elders should do? No, right? Really, I mean, and what we have seen and what we'll continue to see is these qualifications, almost every single one of them is something that really all Christians are supposed to be doing, right? But when you have elders and there is something like that happening, they definitely need to be the ones instructing. That doesn't mean others aren't also instructing. That doesn't mean others aren't also trying to teach. But it is their duty there, right? That's from 1 Thessalonians 5:12. Hey, they're supposed to admonish. All right, so is there any other admonition that an overseer would give that you can think of? Or do they only get involved in people's lives when their lives are not what a Christian's life should be? Okay. Anything that would bring reproach upon the church, which would fall in line with what you said earlier, right? It would make the church maybe look negative. Now, I think that sometimes that's what we get in our heads, maybe because of our experiences, maybe with some overseers in the past, is that, look, really the only time you should ever hear from an overseer is if you're doing something bad, right? That's not really what we read, that it's just, hey, if something needs corrected. Now, they definitely have that duty, but you can admonish someone that maybe is just needing some further teaching, right? It isn't that they're necessarily doing anything wrong, but think about a new convert, somebody who has, I mean, they have obeyed the gospel, right? They've been baptized for the remission of sins, and all of this stuff is new. Everything's new to them, and they don't really know, right? They don't really know what to expect. They don't really know how they're supposed to interact. It doesn't necessarily mean they've done anything wrong yet. Doesn't mean they're necessarily bringing reproach, but hey, shouldn't that overseer of the church be one to say, you know, I want to make sure that I admonish them to do the right things? Does that make sense? So they're not just going to get involved if something's bad. Sometimes, hey, that's a great thing to be involved in, right? And again, is this something that should only be reserved for overseers? You know, sadly, a lot of times when people are converted, when people come to the church, when people are saved by obeying Christ in baptism, nobody admonishes them. It's just, hey, well, good job, good luck, take it easy, right? You figure it out on your own now. You know, if more of us had this mindset of, you know what, I'm gonna admonish, I'm gonna help build up, I'm gonna help support, I'm going to help encourage in the right things, then, you know, the church would probably be, first of all, a lot stronger. People would probably be, like we talked about last time, apt to teach maybe even sooner, right? But there's this idea of support, right? Admonish. Sometimes the admonishing comes from a place of, this is going to bring reproach. Sometimes the admonishing comes from, look, I want to help you mature as a Christian, right? And again, if they are overseers, presbyteros, right, like we talked about, they need to be those that are ensuring that is happening, you know? So admonish us. All right, now let's go to the next question, question 12. And this is going to be from what Jay read earlier. There was actually not from what Jay read because his translation translated it a little different. But if you're using the King James and some other translations, it mentions that these overseers, that these bishops, are not to be a novice. So let's answer the first part of that question. What is a novice? Okay. A beginner. That's a good word. A beginner. Somebody who has just become a Christian. Somebody who is inexperienced, right? And then what is the reason why given that person could not be an elder? They wouldn't have it, right? I mean, how do you lead people if you don't understand? What else? What does the text say? Not become conceited or puffed up. You may read puffed up there, right? I mean, that would definitely be a risk, right? Of somebody who just became a Christian to say, all right, hey, looks like we're good here, and so you're going to be an elder. They might say, "Well, I am. I'm going to be a bishop. I've got a position now, right?" Now that could be a risk for even somebody that's not a novice, but obviously the risk is going to be greater for someone who is a novice. Now, that word novice, I liked, Miss Judy, one of the words that you said, inexperienced, okay? Can somebody be a novice after 30 years as a Christian? Yeah, if they don't grow, right? If they don't grow, I'll give you a little hint. Come tonight for Sunday night, and we'll talk about some of this growth that needs to take place in all Christians. If they don't grow, they could be a novice. You know, again, what age is somebody not a novice? It doesn't give an age, right? Now, there's a lot of, I would say that in our culture, a lot of people, maybe not even without saying it, have given that an age, right? They have said, well, once you can get your senior coffee, you're not a novice, right? Is that what the Bible says? It isn't, right? You can have someone that has been a Christian their entire life and has not grown, has just said, you know what, I'm good with, like we've talked about before, I'm good with just scraping by with the bare minimum, right? I don't want to do too much for Christ, right? And that person might be a novice. Now, you may have somebody else that has become a Christian, and boy, they're a worker physically. They do all sorts of work for the church, okay? Physical work. Could they still be a novice? How could they still be a novice if they're doing physical work for the church? Growing in the Word, right? We have to be careful when we look at this to say, all right, this is the age. This is the life milestone. This is the, this is retirement. That means you're no longer a novice. Is that true? Absolutely not. We have to be careful, right? We have to be careful not to add to. We also have to be careful not to take away. I've mentioned before that I think is it the Jehovah's Witness that are elders when they come to your door? If you ever get one to your door, they've got a name tag, and it'll say Elder so-and-so, right? And sometimes it's a teenage boy, right? You had one yesterday. Was he an elder? According to his name tag, not according to... Oh, good. Yeah, obviously, not just because of this, but a lot of times these elders become elders because they're just kind of starting off, right? They're just kind of, this is some of the phases that they have to go to, some of the missions they have to do to continue in the church properly. And so they'll say, all right, well, you can be Elder J so that you can go door to door and, get your feet wet and get that experience, right? Yeah. They didn't want to. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you know what? If you're prepared for that, like Christians should, there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with somebody coming that, honestly, those people, and I'm getting way off topic. People that are out there doing that, they're not doing it because they think they're wrong, right? They're doing it because they've been taught wrong and they don't understand the truth, right? But they're obviously that should be if some little kid knocks on your door and you see that he has a name tag that says elder, you automatically know there's something wrong, right? Because hey, this guy he's a kid and usually doesn't meet many of the other qualifications as well. But novice could be one of them there. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's, again, off topic, but a good point to bring up. Um, and there's a lot of jokes about them, right? They're out there working, right? They're out there because they see it as important, right? And that's a good lesson for us. They truly believe it. They believe that you're lost. And because they believe you're lost, guess what? They're coming to your door, right? That's it. Sometimes, you hear the jokes or you have them at your door and it almost can get you in the gut, right? Oh, they're out here doing something that I'm not, right? So good point. Good point there. Still wrong, but right about something, right? Right about going out and trying to save souls, right? And again, maybe they'll come in and sit down with Miss Judy next time, and she can help them out, right? Yeah, yeah, yep. That's what we should do, right? We should try, and we shouldn't just, to Bonnie's point, we shouldn't just wait for them to come to our door, right? We need to be living in a way, and then also taking action. Don't just say, well, I'm going to be a great Christian. And yeah, yeah, yep. It is, again, there's some jokes, but it's really sad, right? Sad that people are deceived, and sad that many of us are not that adamant about doing things that way, right? About getting the word out. All right, let's move on to question 13. Why should an elder rule his house well, having his children in subjection with all gravity? This answer is right in the text, but why should an elder rule his house well, having his children in subjection with all gravity? Why is that one of the qualifications? man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God, right? This is God's church. This is what he sent his son to die for, right? It is that important. He wants men to have been proven, right? To be able to say, look, they know how to manage a household, right? So there's, Bonnie, I'm going to get to your question right now, okay? There's a question asked to me, what about a man with adopted children? Can he be an elder? Right, which is silly. I mean, I don't know that you can adopt an 18-year-old. You can? Okay, Jay says you can. But the whole point of this is explained there, right? Has he shown that he can rule that? Has he shown that he can bring them up in the nurture and admonition, right? Now, we know that God recognizes adoption because we are adopted sons, right? He has brought us in, right? We know he recognizes adoption, so that's not the question. Now, sometimes you may have somebody that, let's say there was an 18-year-old, right? And that person was adopted, and that man met all of their qualifications and felt that he met it because of this 18-year-old who maybe spent the summers in his house, right? Now, with this, you might get into some, I don't want to say gray area because that's not a good word. Let's say some matters of judgment, right? What age do you say is the cutoff, right? Because we put 18 on a number because that's our culture, right? So what age do you put on it, right? That's where the conundrum would be. That's where people would struggle with, okay, what is the age at which somebody has been raised in that household? Where is that cutoff? Now, if there is a matter of judgment in the church, who is supposed to be there to help with that matter of judgment? We'll say a matter of opinion. That's probably even a better word than judgment. Who in the church is supposed to help with matters of opinion? Elders are, right? Okay, elders are supposed to help with that. So, and I've done a lot of thinking on this because of Bonnie's question to me, which I appreciate. But all right, I'm gonna mess up my words here. Who are the elders individually subjective to in the church? God, okay. The eldership, right? The elders oversee the church. The elders as a collective body oversee the church, right? That means that the elders individually, I did this, but sometimes it's just this, sometimes it's this, right? The elders individually are still subject to the eldership, right? So if the eldership weighs in on a matter of opinion, and there's one elder, maybe, that doesn't hold that same opinion, we're not talking about things clear in Scripture. We're talking about matters of opinion here. That one elder is subject to the eldership, just like the rest of the congregation. Okay? So let's say you have two elders, and then there's one that there's maybe a matter of opinion on whether or not they're qualified. They meet a qualification. Or maybe if they still meet a qualification. If those other two elders believe that they do not meet the qualification because of a matter of opinion, what is that one that maybe doesn't meet? What's their duty? all subject to what the elders have decided, right? Now, this is where you see a lot of problems in the church, I think, is you'll have these elderships, and there'll be a minority of the eldership that has a matter of opinion on something, and they're not subject to the elders. They don't feel like they are. Hey, it's a matter of opinion, right? They're still subject to the eldership. I hope that makes sense to you all. Now, well, what if you just have two elders and one of them has the qualification that's questionable and one thinks they aren't? Well, you can't have a one-man eldership, can you? And so then the duty would be for one to step down, which would automatically remove the other one from that position, right? Now, yes, you can. Well, I put some. We do. And we do have to be careful about saying on everything, give me book, chapter, and verse. Because there are some things that are implied from Scripture, right? That you don't have to give book, chapter, and verse for. That we know God would be pleased with. Let's real quick, and I know this is still, it's okay to be off topic in this class some. Romans 8:15. We'll start in 14. I'm going to read 14 and 15. For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are the sons of God. For ye have not received the spirit of bondage again to fear, but ye have received the spirit of adoption, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. Our goal is to be children of God, right? We need to make sure in this life that we are God's children. We need to make sure that Romans 8:15 says we become his children by the spirit of adoption. Nobody needs to dare say that we're not really his children because he adopted us, right? And so that is, I feel like for somebody to take that stance and to say, well, it's not legal. Well, if God can recognize me as his adopted son, I believe he's going to recognize adoption, right? So we have to be very careful on taking a stand so adamantly like that on something that, is probably one of those foolish, unlearned questions that don't need to be further debated, right? That are going to breed strife. When we can go to Romans 8:15 and say, hey, God views me as his adopted son, and I know that if he views me as his adopted son, I'm his child. And so, anyways, I know I got off topic there, but I feel like that's an important, if you're ever met with that again, Miss Bonnie, you can lovingly try to point that out, because we got to be careful on things like that. This is the age-old question. Okay, I plan to get into this more when we get into Titus, because of the wording that Titus uses. No, you're all right. I just it's a long discussion. Let me tell you one thing you can do in the meantime, because Titus is probably a few months away. there is on I've shared it before, World Video Bible School. There is a series. It's a 4-part series on there called I think it's the qualifications of elders. And I really, when we get to Titus, I'm going to use some of what they use there. But the way it's Don Blackwell and Glenn Cawley that do this class together, and the way they explain this is fantastic. Now, I don't know. We might look at it a little right now. No, it's all right. I hate to move on because it's something that a lot of people struggle with, right? And you'll see, depending, if a man has raised his child in the church, they were under subjection while they're in the church, and then this child grows up and leaves home, and married or not, whatever, completely leaves the church, right? Does that remove their qualification, right? And I think there are some clues here in 1 Timothy 3. One that ruleth well his own house, having his children in subjection with all gravity. Do you mind reading? I think it was your translation, Jay. You had, is it NASB or what do you? NASB. Read 4 and 5 real quick. All right, so I'm going to give you a something to chew on, okay? It says, manages his household, right? And, I'm sorry, read it one more time because I like your wording. Do what? 4, yep. Keeping his children under control, okay? Are you under your parents' control right now? See who's in here, make sure. Okay. Make sure William hadn't slipped in or something. Are you under your parents' control right now? Do they control you? You've got your own household, right? Yeah, you've left, right? And you've left that home. They no longer have control of you, right? So think of that, okay? And I'm going to leave you on that to chew on, and we'll get into it, okay? I do want you to think. This qualification is one that is explained why it's there. Let me ask you this: if a man raised 6 kids, let's say that, right? Let's just say he raised six children, and one of them left. Does that disqualify him? He has faithful children still, right? And again, we're jumping ahead because Titus is going to kind of use a little bit different wording, kind of help us explain this. But if one of 6 has left, does that automatically disqualify him? So, some things to think on. If you cannot wait till we get to Titus and you want to have a Bible study with me about it, let me know. And we'll have a Bible study about it before we get there. But I do, just because if I start off on Titus now, we won't get back into 1 Timothy for a while. And so when we get to Titus, if I don't bring that up, bring it up again, Jeff, because I feel like that's where there's a little bit more clarity about what we're talking about here. All right. Good questions, though. All right, let's see. Oh, was that the first or second bell? First bell? Okay. Question number 14. When writing to Titus, Paul said that the elders' children should be, well, here we're going to Titus anyways. What did Titus specifically say here? Okay, I was right there. I was trying to figure out what 2 words he was trying to mean. Faithful and then not accused of riot or unruly. I'll give you a little hint. Many people hold the school of thought here that this second part in that question, right after the comma, that's explaining what faithful means here, what the word faithful means here, that they're not accused of riot or unruly, that they're not a unproductive member of society. They're not out there just causing all sorts of trouble, right? That's what some people believe there, because it is kind of, look, are they faithful? Now, again, I'll give you some preview here. Is that faithful to their father when it says faithful children? Or is that faithful to the Father when it says faithful children? Jay says the second one. We will definitely dissect this more when we get on into Titus more. But I'll tell you what, I have a feeling that if we dissect it right now, we're going to be dissecting it all over again when we get back to Titus. All right. Thought question, and we probably don't have much time for this, and obviously this question is written, might make you uncomfortable if you were an elder in a congregation where this question was read. But this book was more written towards a congregation that already has elders. But it says, the elders might appreciate some suggestions on the requirement given to hospitality, or as Titus has it, a lover of hospitality. What are some things which would make the elders seem more given to hospitality? All right, what is hospitality? Being friendly? Good listener, okay. Yeah, easy to talk to. All right. You know, I think that, again, what we usually think of hospitality is if somebody needs a place to stay, well, I'll be hospitable. Come on in, sit down, have a drink of water, right? And sadly, in 2020, we just completely wiped that out, right? Oh, we're not hospitable at all because we can't afford to be, right? Hospitality. So friendly, a good listener, able to, approachable maybe, right? I also think there's a aspect here, you think about who this was written to, right? The early church who met in homes, right? You could probably pretty quickly, if you were in that early church at the time, know who was pretty apt to open up their home to the church, couldn't you? You could know pretty quickly who, hey, if the church needs a place to meet, y'all meet at my house this week. We'll put our stuff on hold. Y'all come on in, right? It'd be easy to see who was hospitable. I'd say when I was a child, it was easy to see who was hospitable. We went over to people's houses almost every Sunday, right? It has taken over our hospitality, hasn't it? It's kind of scary to think. It has taken what used to be pretty commonplace in the church, I would say especially, and made it a rarity, right? Oh, you just stay away from my home. I don't need. I'll put on my face when I'm at church. I don't need people seeing my home and how I am at my home, right? Are you open? Are you willing? Are you opening your life to others, right?
I think that's the big one. You said not necessarily home, but your life.
Your life, yeah.
Someone comes into my house and they're gonna see what I'm doing, and then there's more questions that come with that.
There could be some more questions that come with that, right? All right. Well, we'll talk about this question more. Question number 15 next time. Good discussion, and I'm sure we'll have some more as we move forward with this.